Welcome to Rabbi Son, hot takes on news, pop culture, and religion, hosted by Rabbi Patrick and his son Javon. Spiritual, irreverent, always fearless, produced by Darshan Yeshiva. Javon, how's school, as we say, like every day to you, and you respond always?
Oh, it's terrible.
Yep. Well, it used to be fine. Now it's terrible.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Math is mathing.
It is.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, you'll get through it. What are you studying right now?
We're still in the same unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, the different geometric sequences and the different sequences and numbers and whatnot.
All right. Well, I promise that this will be way more interesting than geometric sequences, which sounds like a new wave band from the 80s, geometric sequences. Okay, so just wanted to thank everyone for watching, and please let us know how we're doing, because we're trying different software and recording things and cameras and lighting and all this other stuff. I'm wearing a black jacket because I was so washed out. And the last one, right, that I kind of felt I needed some contrast. So you can let me know, let us know how we're doing. I really appreciate you. Like, share, subscribe, all that cool stuff. And let's get into it. Israel and Lebanon. Okay, why did you want to talk about Israel and Lebanon?
Because of what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about a myriad of different topics, but, they're just closely related to life.
Closely related to life. Okay.
As what you do.
Yeah, that is very true. My take on all of this stuff, and we're going to talk about more Israel stuff in a minute. My take on all of this is that I'm not a military strategist. I'm not a war expert. This is not something anyone trained me on. I didn't serve in the military. Shout out to everyone who did. So I'm utterly clueless. My general thing about this stuff is I don't know. And I think really my biggest thing is I'm not privy to all the information that Netanyahu or Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever has. So I don't really know what to think of what people are doing. On a human level, I hate the idea of the devastation of war and the loss of human life, and also how war has a tendency to create more people who want to continue to go to war because it becomes such an ideological thing. And I don't know how you have countries like Japan, for example, that didn't go that way, right? You think about dropping a nuclear weapon. If anything should have caused generations of people to want to attack, California, basically, it would be that. So I don't know why that happens in the Middle East, but it doesn't happen with other conflicts.
But having you said you visit the Middle East and you even trying to buy certain things from street vendors, they try to haggle and they try to who is going to get one or
that's the thing.
So it's that's the thing. Constant trying to one up. Maybe it's a cultural thing.
It totally is. Yeah, no, it totally is. And that's an important thing, what you're saying about cultural things, because, it's Thomas Sowell and a few other thinkers who talk about the idea that culture matters. And the culture you come from and how you relate to it says a lot about who you are and the values that you have. So what is it culturally about the Middle East that would lead to one particular type of engagement versus, Japan, Germany, all these other places that we've gone to war with and had completely different outcomes. So I don't know. It's a non-answer, but it's what I got.
I don't know either. But with the Japanese, during, World War II, it was fight until you can't fight anymore.
Right.
So I wouldn't know what would change.
Yeah.
That would make them be okay, we're gonna disarm and we're gonna stay where we're at and then just decide to coexist.
Yeah. Well, and think about World War II, there was denazification in Germany. And I've actually been reading a little bit about this because people have been talking about this in the context of Gaza and Hamas, right? Can you de-Hamas an area? And I haven't read anything good on it, so I'm not going to bother to, add it here. But if someone has something interesting, please share it, because this is an area that I'm really interested in. The whole idea of World War II was started because of World War I, right? Because of grievances. And so, yeah, what was it about World War II that finally ended that grievance culture? I really don't know.
I mean, we could talk about World War One and what led to World War II, but I mean, I do think it was World War II would have probably never happened if the grievances weren't placed on, like, not going into the past and be like, oh
Right,
yeah,
right.
right. But it's like if the grievances were on the countries that actually started the conflict rather than punishing a country of, having its allies, back.
Right.
That's like France getting punished for having the US's back. Like,
Right.
so I think, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean this is always the problem when you have allyship, right? Because before World War One, there were allies, right? Like the Revolutionary War, France aligned with the American colonies and all that. But at the same time, right? Like World War One was all of these nation states all making compacts with each other and then going to war simply because they had their buddies back and all that. I mean, that's what's happening, frankly, in the Middle East. With, I think, as of the recording of this, Israel is fighting on 7 fronts.
7? What is
7? Like seven different, basically, areas, right? Everything stretching into Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank, and, in other areas. Yeah, so it's fighting a 7. I think 7 is the right number. 5 to 7 front war. Yeah, that's not a war, but it is a war.
Yeah, no one wants to call it a war, even though what are you dropping bombs for and having military
call it what it is. Yeah,
if it's not that, I mean, because what else is it?
Right. Well, speaking of these questions, let's have a quick talk about the LGBTQ plus community and Palestine and all of these other things, because October 7th just happened as of the recording of this, and there were protests that happened in our city, and there was a big LGBTQ plus sort of aligned protest, basically, right? Like people had like images of rainbow inclusive flags, and there's all these like names for these different groups that are LGBT pro-Palestine groups and things like that. I don't know how many of them are formally like nonprofits or if it's just sort of ragtag people online. I don't know. So you're Gen Z. I think that this is very much more generational, right? I don't think you see as many people my age who are LGBTQ plus who are part of that. Now, maybe that's not true, but that's just an observation of mine. What's your sort of take on this, as far as like how this kind of coalesces together?
I honestly think that, like, regardless of whether the Palestinians or I'm gonna say Hamas for like, because that's what I'm talking about.
Sure.
No, actually, I'm gonna say the Palestinians because that makes more sense. Whether or not that if the Palestinians themselves like don't support LGBTQ people
right
in the United States, I think they take it as like, even though they don't support us, we don't want them to die.
Right.
Like, rather than like, them saying like, oh, like, like just because they don't like us doesn't mean we want them to die. Like,
sure.
I mean, I think that's like with anyone being like, okay, this has gone too far. Like, this has gone on too long. Both sides, people are dying, and like, this needs to be a peaceful resolution. I'm not really sure about the protest aspect of it. I mean,
do you feel like, I mean, or is it just social media playing tricks on us, that it seems like there is an outsized presence of the LGBTQ plus community and this particular topic? I don't know if that's true or if that's just like, it's what you see on Instagram and TikTok, so like, therefore it's true. You know what I mean?
I mean, like you said, the word protest. I mean, what did the protest look like?
Well, here's why I say this, because you see like fairly, the ones I've seen at least, fairly peaceful protests. I don't think people are physically harming each other or anything like that. There has been on some college campuses some stuff with like Jewish students being blocked from going to certain spaces. That I don't know as much about. I've seen it, but I wouldn't want to talk about something that I wasn't there and I didn't read up enough on. But it's just more that you see someone wearing like a keffiyeh, a Palestinian button, like flag button or something like that, and then a pronoun button and a flag, pride flag button, and it's the visual I think that catches me of like all of these things together, and it just seems like there's for the portion of Americans, and including young Americans, who identify as LGBTQ, right? That is a certain percentage, but it is smaller than everyone else. It is a minority, literally a numerical minority. But to have it be such a large number, an outproportioned number of people present at the pro-Palestine protests is interesting to me. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be LGBTQ people at that protest because you're a percentage of the population. It's like saying there wouldn't be Black people or there wouldn't be Hispanic people or whatever. But because it's disproportionate, that's what I find interesting.
I mean, I would like to see like the demographics of LGBTQ people at the protest, because that then would tell me a lot. If there were no, Black LGBTQ people or like, other different people of color at the protest.
There must be in more diverse areas. I feel like, I don't know what to ask for in terms of representation of different people. It just seems like there's a lot of LGBTQ people, mostly white people. There's Arabs, which obviously makes sense. And it's a younger population, which also kind of makes sense too. I don't see an outstanding number of people of color beyond Arabs and beyond maybe people of mixed racial background. But you're also trying to guess what people are, and that's kind of not fair too, because you don't know by looking at someone what their race or their ethnic background is. But it does seem like the protests I've seen tend to skew, outside of the Arab community, heavily white, heavily young, and heavily LGBTQ. And the LGBTQ part is the one that's interesting to me, because you even said it, the idea of like, well, we're there for you even if you're not there for us. But is that fair? Is that fair given America's history? Because think about like as a person of color, like how would you feel if you had to be there for people who weren't there for you?
I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter to them because they're not like having to live over there in that like situation. So it's not like, they're actively being, because it would be a different story if they were being actively discriminated against and their like presence was being like, oh, we don't want, if somebody were to tell you to your face rather than like, you hearing about it on the internet where people like going around and asking like, Palestinians like on the street, like, what do they think? It's different like from over there versus, your neighbor right there. Because then you feel the heat. You feel the pressure. You feel the, oh, we don't want your support anyway because, of our culture and our, religion. Right. So there's a difference. Like you cannot want, people to die, and you could also not go protest. Because you being out in the street isn't progressing the movement because you're not really you're not shifting anything. If you want shift in policy, you need shift in leadership. Which means well said. You go vote. And that doesn't mean you harass like your local city council, like because they can't do anything. They can't do anything.
Your county alderman can't do much about the Palestinians.
So
that's like, fair, or the Israelis for that matter.
And like when it comes to like even the like gubernatorially or like state politics, that doesn't, you going up there and like making a big ruckus and it's still not going to change anything. You need to Congress, in the Senate, the presidency. That's where that lies. I get you there for a cause, but then seem performative because in actuality nothing changes. Just because the city council votes on a resolution doesn't stop anything. Multiple city councils have voted on resolutions. It doesn't change America's policy in regards to Israel handling of,
right,
the war.
right. Yeah, and I mean, I think of these things in terms of 9/11, right? Because that was my sort of big thing. I figured for your generation it was going to be COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's going to be now the war between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah and what have you.
I mean, you have to have multiple big things.
Right, yeah.
Maybe there's multiple things.
All we had Y2K, which was a nothing burger.
Exactly.
Like, literally nothing happened. Except my college transcript got messed up.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the one thing. It said it because my birthday is January 4th, when it flipped over from 1999 to 2000, it said that I was born January 4th, 1900. I'm like the only person I know who had any kind of like Y2K problem. It did screw up my transcripts though. I had to deal with that. It was annoying. But anyway, like I think of this whole thing as in parallel to 9/11, and what I don't want to see for Israelis, Palestinians, Americans, anyone is to be in an intractable 20-year war. Because I just have seen from people I've known who served in the military who are my age, and the cost of war on people's just families and communities, and also financially, right? War's expensive. Someone has to pay for it. I don't want that for anybody. But at the same time, Israel has a right to. I know it's a cliche, right? Israel has a right to defend itself, but that actually is true. And I really do think there is some truth to the idea that if Hamas laid down its weapons, let's say October 6th, right? If the tweet had gone out, we're done. We accept your right to exist. Let's negotiate. I really do feel like someone in the cabinet would have gone and said, okay, let's try to work something out here. Mm-hmm. But October 7th was when the ceasefire was broken, and it was broken by people that killed hippie, raver kids at an outdoor music concert. So like, what do you do?
Actually, I would like to inverse this questioning.
Okay.
How do you feel about, Jewish Voices for Peace and organizations like that, people who are Jewish, who are saying, look, this is
right.
This conflict needs to stop.
Right.
Even, people who've lost their, loved ones in October 7th have been like, this is not sustainable and we need to, work for a resolution. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I won't speak to very specific organizations because I sort of feel like I'm not part of them. I don't know how they feel like specifically. And I also don't want to get involved with shade on the internet where if I say something and I misspeak or I don't really know the context of how a board of directors feels or I just want to stay out of that. Big picture though. Certainly, I think it's like, well, it's what I just said. I do not want to see anyone go through another 20-year war. That was a huge pain and it set back a lot of people and it hurt a lot of people. A lot of people lost their lives and their livelihoods. The data on people who came home from the Middle East and were suicidal from it, right? I've known people who fought earlier than that were, in conflict in other areas, and you come home with a lot of problems. And I don't want people to have that. Whose responsibility is it to stop it? This is where I'm going to say it's on Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and all these other groups. Like, if you stop, there's going to be the support to get Israel to stop. But as long as they keep going, don't know what Israel's supposed to do about that. How many more bombs have to be lobbed at Israel before Israel, finally has the right to say, okay, enough. And for the Jewish groups, I would just say, let's not put everyone in the same American, Western, democratic, secular bubble, because not everyone lives that way. Not everyone wants that. Right? And culture matters. And if your goals are different than the goals of other countries, then it's not going to work out. Case in point, no two democracies have ever gone to war with each other, ever, historically. It's always theocracies, autocracies, oligarchies, monarchies they go to war against democracy or with each other, right?
Mm.
So my hope would be for democracy in Gaza and in the West Bank that is not sort of like these oligarchies or theocracies or terror funded type things, because then there would actually be a shot. And honestly, what people say about Gaza could be the next Singapore, right? It could be the next Hong Kong. It is in a beautiful area, absolutely beautiful. And if they could sort of work with American allies like these Jewish peacenik type groups to build that, to build commerce, to build education, to build schools, game on. Game on. Like, make it happen.
Oh, okay. So, next point actually that was not discussed, but then I felt like I asked the question.
Oh, okay.
With you said that Israel has the right to exist.
Yes.
Does any country have the right to exist?
I'm going to go with the answer that Yarmulkes, who's an objectivist philosopher and coincidentally an Israeli, said about this question, which is that people have the right to form a new country when it is based on the idea of being freer than wherever they came from. Freedom is the most legitimate reason to form a country. And so, if, for example, there was a group of people in Gaza or a group of people in the West Bank who said, we want to free ourselves from these conditions, we want to create a freer society than the one we're in, then I would say that that seed of a country has the right to grow. You look at the Kurds, the Yazidis, you look at the Uyghurs, right? These are all people who, if they said on the national platform, we want to create our own country, and we promise that it will be freer than whatever conditions we're coming from, I would say that those are countries that have the right to exist. And I would say in Israel's case, it is freer than what it had before, which was a series of colonizations, one after the other after the other. People who are anti-Zionism will say that the formation of the Jewish state is another form of colonization. I would disagree based on the fact that it is a democracy. There was not a democracy there. There is one now. Is it a flawed democracy? Sure. We live in America, which is also a flawed democracy. Canada's a flawed democracy. Mexico's a flawed democracy. They are all flawed. But they're freer than the circumstances that existed before, which is colonization, monarchy, theocracies, things like that.
But couldn't you make the case now that you open up this door? And I was just trying to go there, but
I know this really... 1 hour episode is about to be split into two.
It just came into my head.
Sure.
You said people like, the Uyghurs, the Kurds,
the Yazidis, right.
People who wanted freedom.
Yes.
Right? And if they came on the national stage and were recognized that seed should be able to flourish. Mm-hmm. Right? You have multiple countries now, recognize Palestine as a state.
Okay.
So shouldn't they also be able to grow even within the land that is Israel? Shouldn't they be able to create their own?
I think within Gaza, which is not Israel, absolutely. Within the West Bank, which Judea and Samaria, whatever language you want to use, I think that there is room for that there. There was supposed to be. Right? There was actually supposed to be, this is what partition was. Mm. Partition was literally you create your land, right? And the Arab community rejected it, went to war against Israel, and it's a mirror image of where we are now, right? It's all these countries who attacked Israel managed to win, right? Now, when you lose a war, you lose the land too, right? Because there's natural consequences to your actions, or at least that's the way we talk about it historically. Mm. We can say whether that's morally right or not. That's a different story. But that is the consequence, right? If you lose, you lose. I would say, if there were groups in Gaza and in the West Bank that said, we recognize Israel's right to exist, we want to do business, meaning we want to build something that is secular, Western, use different language, non-autocratic, that is democratic, that is, right, just something freer. Then game on. I will support that, whatever that looks like. What you don't get to have is another theocracy, another monarchy, another totalitarian state. That to me is where I draw the line. That's not about freedom. That's about something else.
I was letting you speak.
Okay.
I had no rebuttal because
okay.
It was a question that just came into my head.
It just came into your head. All right. Well, let's keep staying kind of spicy here. Now I got questions for you. Reparations. So there's been talk for quite a long time about reparations. Israel got reparations for the Holocaust from Germany. Germany paid for Israel's power grid. That's sort of a segue into from that topic to this topic. You're a black man in America. What are your thoughts? And I have some Jewish thoughts about this, but what are your thoughts generally speaking?
I mean, well, reparations has been a conversation, but it's become more, back in the national conversation, as Kamala Harris has been asked the question on whether or not she would consider reparations, getting a reparation bill passed. And, she's, I wouldn't say committed to getting a, study done, or commission, which you wouldn't need because people have already studied this. Right. It's already been studied. Mm-hmm. And I get that people feel as though they do not need to pay for the actions of someone else as regards to slavery. But as for Jim Crow, that is something that people are still alive. Right. And those consequences still have effects today. Right. And I feel like if the Japanese had their reparations, from being thrown into internment camps, and former slave owners got, repaid for lost property, then so should people during Jim Crow. Right. People's neighborhoods were torn down, burned, businesses gone. And, people who, multiple, black towns are now lakes. Right. Highways. Yeah. Yeah. So that's people's land, that's people's homes, that's people's property that could have, what's the word? Appreciate. Right?
Would appreciate value.
Over time.
Yeah. Right.
That's lost income.
Right. And lost opportunity. Yeah.
That they've had. And so I don't believe there needs to be a commission. I do think it's the United States' job to right those wrongs, considering itself allowed those things to happen, and allowed organizations to discriminate based on race, and they allowed all these terrible things to happen. So it is their responsibility. Right. Period. Right. And people can say oh, well, that wasn't me. I mean, well, it wasn't you. We're not asking you. We're asking the government, and that's the government's responsibility.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Obviously, you're someone who keeps up with the news and is interested in public policy and law and all these other things. Are these conversations that you think happen in sort of the I hate to use the term average because there's no such thing as average, but average black household?
I would not answer that question.
Yeah, I understand. It's kind of a quirky one.
Yeah. So, I would not answer that question. Yeah. I do think it's a thing that a lot of black people think about. Right. When it comes to, that they've been talking about for years now. So I do think it's getting talked about more.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, maybe because I've been seeing different stuff online, especially about in these major cities, safe haven, quote unquote, safe haven cities. And one city I've seen is Chicago specifically. Okay. And the residents there are what about us here? It's all these supports are going to these immigrant communities. Okay. But our community has been deteriorating. Right. And we've been asking for help. Okay. And there's not any help for us. Yeah. I don't want to generalize it, but yeah, sure. I think it's black people as a whole are we're here, we've been asking for help, there is no help. And we could do that because nothing stopped you from doing reparations. Nothing constitutionally stopped you from doing it. Because, like I said, it's been done before. And if a country like Germany could do it, even after a war, which they did, the cost of the war, and they still paid Israel reparations, the United States could do that. Right. And it's not in a war. And it had, it brings them more money, generates more revenue than Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So it could do reparations.
Yeah. I was thinking about what is the sort of Jewish basis for this kind of thought as far as what reparations could be. And I think what you're saying, which is taking reparations for enslavement and saying, well, okay, unfortunately, no one's alive to receive that money that had that experience, but Jim Crow is one. There's plenty of people who are alive today who lived under Jim Crow.
Yeah,
even if it was for a year of their life, they still lived under it.
I mean, yeah, former teachers, didn't go to school because segregation.
Right.
Because they didn't want to integrate.
Right.
That had a profound effect on them.
Right.
And their education.
Right.
You had multiple instances, it's very, easy to look up instances of, towns being burned down. I know, Tulsa has been like the one that
yeah.
But it's like those are people's lives. These are people who lost businesses, who lost homes.
Right.
And then like the effect of Jim Crow, redlining, keeping people in, neighborhoods
mm-hmm.
rather than like, allowing them to do better.
Right.
To go to better. To
right.
have that land, own that property.
Right.
That would like, appreciate and value. Then that's like something for their family to have.
Right.
A foundation.
Right.
You remove the foundation.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great way of saying about like removing the foundation, because what do you have to build on at that point? Right. Yeah.
If you're always renting and you're being discriminated against, you can't get a home loan.
Right.
You can't do XYZ.
You don't have collateral to then get a loan to start a business and build wealth that way. Exactly. That's a big one. Yeah, and there's an interesting Jewish take on this, which is that when the Israelites were leaving Egypt, you have this slave culture, right? Like you have these people who are enslaved, they become free, wandering in the desert, right? But then throughout the text, you find all of this talk of, gold and silver and bronze and wool and linen and different jewels like lapis lazuli and all these other things. And it begs the question, like, well, wait a minute. You guys were enslaved, right? So, like, where did that come? Like, where's that stuff from? Mm. Well, the answer is that it was essentially the spoils of war. That as the Israelites are leaving, and it depends on sort of what you read and how you want to read it, and whatever. But essentially, the Egyptians, gave up property of theirs and gave it to the Israelites. Now, was it plundered in war, or was it given as what we would today think of as, reparations, and who owed that, mm-hmm. right? Who among the Egyptians owed that to these people? So again, it's like, it depends on how you want to read it and how you want to interpret it and which commentator you want to go with. But I think there is something to be said for this idea of when the Israelites left, they didn't leave empty-handed, mm-hmm. right? And so so I think that there is sort of something there. I can see where people come from, where they say, well, but isn't that what the Civil Rights Act was? Isn't that what affirmative action was? Wasn't that sort of a non-financial version of reparations? But then
because the Civil Rights Act was giving people basic rights,
right,
to be respected on basis of being
right. Yeah, that's why I don't.
For affirmative action, well, we don't have that anymore. Well, people had a problem with that,
right?
So,
right.
Kind of
right. Exactly.
These persons are saying
exactly.
Those things.
Exactly. But without getting into the details of like how it should look, and we're a religious nonprofit, we don't advocate for particular public policies. I will say there is a religious basis for something, and I think particularly with the Jim Crow argument. And I wish I could find the link to, I think it's the Manhattan Institute or someone that wrote up this idea of, if you really want to talk about reparations, talk about that. I think that there's definitely a religious argument that can be made in its favor from a Jewish perspective. Yeah. I just want to know like what kind of cool stuff the Israelites left with, and how weird was it to be an Egyptian and be like, here you go. Sorry about that whole slavery thing, but
I mean,
didn't know. What would it have been like? I mean, can you just imagine?
I mean, no, what happened to you? You say like, the Israelites left,
Didn't leave empty-handed.
Didn't leave empty-handed, but like, what happened to, what was it? 1 mule and 100 acres or something?
Yeah, 40 acres and a mule.
Yeah, 40 acres and a mule. What happened to that? Like, black people didn't leave. They didn't get their 40 acres and they didn't get that mule.
There you go.
So,
be interesting to try and figure out how many acres of land the U.S. government owns. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all right, moving right along. You had a question about these things, about yarmulkes.
Yeah, the little hats.
Okay, what's your question?
What do they mean?
Okay, so yarmulke or kippah. Yarmulke is Yiddish, kippah Hebrew. So just a head covering. You can wear any kind of hat you want. The idea comes from the Talmud. And so the idea is that one does not pray unless their head is covered. And then the idea is that you should say 100 blessings in a day. So if you're going to say 100 blessings in a day, and some of those blessings are going to be spontaneous, it would be pretty good for you to like have your head covered, right? You got to have something. Some people will actually, if they're going to say a blessing and they're not wearing a yarmulke, they'll do like this and like, eat something or say a prayer or whatever. So you can do that in a pinch. I think personally that the kippah holds a different kind of significance, which is how sometimes cultures will take tools of oppression and turn them around on people and make it part of their practice. So throughout history, Jews have been forced to wear something, depending on where they are, to signify that they are Jewish, right? So Holocaust, it's the yellow star, right? In some cultures, it was wearing a hat, different things like that. So I think there's like this Venn diagram of the religious stuff that I just told you about with this kind of we're forced to wear something history. And I think it's a little bit like how, sometimes like in like rap videos, like, or, early hip hop, you would hear like certain kinds of language that blacks had been called or whatever, right? That were pejorative. But then the culture kind of takes that back and spins it in its own way. And I think the kippah kind of has that origin too. But the actual religious concept is you're going to be praying anyway, make it convenient.
100 blessings a day. I mean, what would a blessing be like?
Any kind of prayer. So you have to say 100 of them. And the rabbinic formula is Baruch Atah Adonai. So blessed are you, God. And then blah, 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 blah.
Oh, but who's saying that 100 times a day?
The Jews are. 100 blessings a day.
And do you say 100 blessings a day?
I try to.
That didn't help.
I'm not always effective at it. I do the best I can.
Yeah, because I was like...
Well, so this is another one of these convenience things. So in the prayer services, right? So daily prayer, there's all of these blessings, and they add up to 100. So you could, in theory, go to a synagogue, pray the service, and then leave, and you've done your 100.
Oh.
Yeah, so you could do it that way, too. But, the idea is that there are certain times of day, there are certain moments that occur where you would want to say a blessing. So you eat a particular food, there's a prayer for that food. You see a rainbow, there's a particular one for that. If you have a new moment, it's called Shehekianu, you would say Shehekianu. And you're going to start the prayer with Baruch Atah Adonai, da-da-da-da-da. So, yeah, so best to be prepared.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that's about. Alrighty, easy enough. That was a lot easier to figure out than Israel or reparations.
Yeah,
so, yeah, definitely. Okay, so you were telling me a story about a church and something about giving money to the poor. So what's the story about that?
Okay, so I'm gonna go to it now.
Okay,
because I'd just rather read it.
Okay, go for it. Try to explain it. I understand. So while you're doing that, I just want to thank again everyone who is watching us, listening to us. Please again, like, share, subscribe. Touch the notification button because that's going to get you this, all of the time. Also, please send us an email, DM us, comment. Let us know how we're doing. Is this content that you want to see? Should we do things differently? Et cetera, et cetera. We are amateurs here, so we need your help.
Okay. So this is going to be the one part about that word that I can't say.
Sure.
And then it's not an appropriate word. I just can't say it.
Okay.
And then it also ties into a religious element,
Okay.
which I would like to get, your comment on.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is about tithing.
Exactly. Okay. So this pastor, Keon Henderson, basically says there's no blessing in, giving to the poor.
Okay.
And that, God says there's only, multiplication when you give, what's that word again?
Tithes.
And offerings to the church, basically.
Okay.
And yeah, so what's your thoughts on that?
What's my thoughts on that? I don't know anything about Christian theology. What I can tell you is the idea of tithing. It comes from a practice called peyote, which is not peyote. Nice try, everybody. So it's the corners of the field. So you would have a field, an agrarian society. That's what the economy is based on. So the corners of the field could not be mowed down, couldn't be gleaned or whatever. Shows you how much I know about agriculture. You're from the country, so maybe you know what the right word is. But basically, you can't gather from those corners. Mm-hmm. The reason why is that people who are on the margins of society, so this is poor people, widows, all of that, they were allowed to go on your property and take from that land. And this was part of the social safety net in the ancient world, ancient Israelite thinking, okay? So the question then is, how do you transition that to a more modern, mercantile, industrial, whatever society? And so it became this idea of the kuppah. So basically, you have this communal fund. Everyone puts in, and in fact, the Talmud even says that even someone who lives off of charitable giving is required to give to it. So it's a safety net that everyone provides to. And it's a blind system. So everybody puts in, and then no one knows who's taking out. So it's not me giving to you and saying like, oh, it's we all put in together and we take sort of as needed. So that was Maimonides, and that was his system. So Maimonides, a famous Jewish sage. So tithing became this idea of percentage of income as opposed to percentage of land, right? So 10% was the idea. You could think of it as like an income tax, if you will. I think of it more as sort of like a productivity tax of some kind. But that's where this tithing thing comes from. I'll tell you, I don't know the origin of the word tithe. This is not a Hebrew term. But it was never meant to be just what pays for a building or clergy salaries, things like that. What I will say, and this is something people don't fully understand, the ancient priests in the temple did have a sort of tithe that they lived off of. So they were not allowed to own land. They had to work in the temple. So if you were going to offer a sheep or a ram or whatever type of creature for a burnt offering, it's like a barbecue. They would barbecue the animal, and the priests would live off of that meat, and you would share it with them. So it was a certain amount that they would get to have, and you would share in that with them. There was an issue because of colonization with buying those animals. So if you are going to Jerusalem to offer, a Passover sacrifice, let's say, or Sukkot or whatever, you might not walk all the way from Haifa with your goat. Like, that doesn't make practical sense. So you'd buy one. So you'd go to Jerusalem, you have your money, you go and you buy a kosher animal, an unblemished animal, and then that's what you're going to take to the priest. Okay, well, but what if the kind of currency that you have is not the currency that's accepted by the temple? Then you would have these people who were like money changers. And they would say, okay, I'll take your money and I'll change it for other currency, and I'm going to get a commission. This isn't like a free service that we're providing here. So this became a thing that for poor people became an issue of like, well, wait a minute, you're kind of taxing me at every single point here. Christianity has a story about this of Jesus, turning over the tables of the money changers, right? And that is where that anxiety and anger and frustration would have come from, is the idea of, well, you're hitting my pocketbook at every single point. It wasn't just about sort of building up the building, right? These tithes helped the marginalized people. The percentage of animal that was going to feed the priests, that's what they lived off of because they couldn't own property. So they didn't have a means of generating income beyond doing the job there, stuff like that. So when I hear a story about someone who wants the offerings to the church or the synagogue or the mosque to just go to the real estate, okay, that's when there's a problem.
All right. The funds going to the building.
Right.
So how do you feel about these ideas of these mega churches or mega religious organizations that, get all these donations from, their constituents, and then it's not going to charitable deeds. Like food banks, clothing, books and book bags for kids for school.
Sure.
Different things like that.
I mean, you have to have money to pay for the building if people are going to use it, right? That's just reality. And if you want to have clergy, you have to pay for them too. Got it. Beyond that, what's the point? Like, what are you trying to do here? What's this faith community that you're part of trying to accomplish? And my hope would be that you keep your budget inexpensive so that the blessings that people give you of their hard-earned income will go towards those who need it and whatever your particular missional purpose is. All right, well, moving on to weapons. So Hanukkah's not for a while, but it seems like it's a conversation throughout the year of what you want for Hanukkah. So you have proposed that you want something. What do you want for Hanukkah?
I want 2 swords.
2 swords. Tell me about these swords.
They are Japanese swords. One is a katana, and the other one is a shorter version of a katana. I don't remember the name of it.
Okay.
It starts with a T, but it's a shorter version.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you feel like you should get these weapons for Hanukkah.
Exactly.
And what is your desire for these weapons rooted in?
Nothing. I think I was watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then I seen one of the characters with like the short one. And I was like, why not get the long one too?
Oh, okay. And these are going to like hang up in your room? Is that the idea?
Yeah, or I just go outside and like,
and just practice?
Exactly.
Oh yeah, that won't be a huge problem when you go outside like fighting mysterious non-existent forces with your weapons, like and someone's just walking by with their dog. That won't be weird.
No, people should mind their business. Like,
I guess.
This is the neighborhood, People are weird. They exist. And like, we
do live in a Stranger Things-esque neighborhood. I mean, that's for sure.
People walk their dogs. I don't complain about them walking their dogs. So they should be looking at me in, front yard, slices of things.
Well, all right. So I'm going to make a deal. Let's see. If you think that Javon should get weapons for Hanukkah, please comment below and tell us what kind of weapons he should get.
Yeah. Exactly. You need weapons are not only for a show, they're for protection. If you don't want to, be drastic and get like, a certain, weapon, that has, other metal things to it.
Got to be careful what words you
create
use
a reaction
in a video because, the AI will,
Exactly.
We're already fighting the algorithm enough. All right. Well, so weapons for Hanukkah. Go on ahead and post. Let us know what you think. Javon, you got any more news or an inspirational quote for us?
Let me go to the news that I,
The news with Javon.
So, as of an hour ago,
okay,
according to this, been following topics that we've been talking about, Israel Defense Minister says that Iran's attack was aggressive but inaccurate, and that Israel's retaliation will be, quote, deadly, pinpoint accurate, and most importantly, surprising. They will not know what happened or how it happened. They will just see the results.
Oof.
So,
that is a flex. That is a flex. You have to admit.
Jeff talking about, how the world is reacting,
right?
Whether it's in the United States, elsewhere, or in Israel itself. Do you think that, I know you said that Israel has a right to defend itself, but do you think that we'll get to a point where there will be a point of total escalation where you can't come back from? And do you think that, since you've, been to Israel and, the culture there, that the Israelis will sit, and be like, we should keep this going? Or do you think there will be more people saying, as it continues, these are our children, these are our family members, we do not want to keep this going? Like, do you think that this is going to last longer? Or do you think that it'll eventually come to a point where everyone is going to be like, look, this is not great for anyone, and an escalation will, bring in more, and then, escalate until it escalates to a point where more parties are involved, not just Israel,
right? And I think that more are, and I think it's behind the scenes, and I think it's just as true with Iran as it is, other places, because I suspect that there are people, there are countries, there are regimes that benefit from the idea of destabilizing the West. Now, again, I'm not a poli-sci expert. I don't know anything about war, but it just wouldn't surprise me, right? Like, in terms of, is there an intractable moment where it's permanent war? I don't really think so, because I think eventually you run out of money. Eventually you run out of resources. Eventually you run out of manpower, leadership, whatever. Leadership changes. I don't know. But I know there's two words that end it all. If Iran did this, it would end it all. We surrender. That ends it. It ends it. Overnight. We surrender. That's all this has to happen.
I mean, do they need to surrender, or do they need to stop?
Well, if you stop, but you don't make a point of saying why you're stopping, then there's always that kind of background thing, right? Of like, but are you really stopping, or are we really?
I mean, but we talked about that earlier with the trying to, get one up on each other.
Yeah, right.
Like, either if I'm gonna say that, we're gonna say those exact words, we surrender, because then it's gonna be like, oh, did you just say that? Oh, so the other party got like, the one up.
This is why culture matters, right? Yeah, I don't know. No idea. But I think the phrase "we surrender" would be taken very seriously.
All right.
By the international community, at least.
And the next big thing, related to the U.S.
Okay.
Getting off, foreign politics.
Okay.
Bringing it back.
Okay.
According to, this, God, I can't say this name, but, credit is due in my head.
Do you want me to look at it and try and figure it out? According to, I don't see the name that I'm supposed to be looking at here.
Right there.
The Spectator Index, the U.S. No, I'm not looking at the right thing.
Yeah,
sorry.
You are.
Am I?
Yeah, Spectator. You said it.
Oh, the Spectator. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm so speaking now.
I thought you said the name. I thought it was the name of a person.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. The Spectator. Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay, anyway.
Spectator Index. The U.S. Government budget deficit has surged to $1.8 trillion in this fiscal year ending in September, with interest payment on the debt reaching $950 billion.
Yeah.
That is a lot.
That's a lot.
I mean, that's woof.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of a lot of money, continues, on with America, Senate campaigns have now, accumulated, $2 billion.
Yeah.
And then Kamala Harris' presidential campaign has also secured $1 billion in donations. It's not counting Trump, because we don't know how much money he has.
Right.
So do you think that, I get that people see these things as important, which they are, their elections,
right?
They decide,
right?
Which party controls the government, which policies go through, all of that. But do you think that the $3 billion that have gone into funding these political campaigns could have been used better?
I mean, I hate to say better, because then I'm judging how other people spend their money, but I mean, $3 billion is a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money.
Because I thought, $3 billion, if, because they think, people don't give to charities like they used to. They don't go out and do charitable deeds anymore.
Right.
So it's like, you can't give to charities, but
right.
you can donate to a political campaign.
It's a lot of food banks.
Yeah, there's a lot of food banks, a
billion.
lot of kids that can have clothes, a lot of kids that can have book bags, the school supplies, a lot of community centers that can be built, like a bunch of different things.
Yeah,
I don't know. This world is interesting.
Yeah. So what is it? 1,000? So a million. So a billion is 1,000 million, and we're talking about 3. So $3,000 million projects of some kind, like 3,000 different $1 million ways of making communities better or helping families or whatever. That's a lot of
many communities that could use that and have that support. Well, people who give this money, their communities could use that support as well.
Right.
Yeah. I think, that's all that's in the news is, standard issue.
A little bit of a slow news week other than Israel.
Yeah, Israel, politics. Yeah, presidential elections.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, inspirational quote.
All right. The easiest thing to be in this world is you. The most difficult thing to be in this world is what other people want you to be. Don't let them put you in that position. I want you to sit with that, to think about that, to reflect on that.
Thank you to our sponsors at Darshan Yeshiva for making this content possible. Darshan Yeshiva provides beginner-level online Jewish learning, including the very popular Conversion to Judaism program, with sponsoring rabbis and students all over the world. Start your Jewish journey any place, anywhere, and anytime with our conservative, reform, reconstructionist, Jewish renewal, humanistic, and post-denominational rabbi mentors. Become the Jew you always wanted to be with Darshan Yeshiva.